Hello. The Turner Prize is 40 years old this year, and it's become a great, if sometimes controversial, British institution. It's awarded to any artist born in Britain and working anywhere in the world, or any artist from anywhere in the world working in Britain. Let me begin with a Tate publicity video from 2018.
The Turner Prize. The bloody Turner Prize.
I think that art should be like when you go to the cinema, when it has a lot of impact.
The turn is all about having an opinion.
Artists are clowns in many ways. The Turner Prize is a circus.
We saw a number of past winners flashed in front of us. There was Tracy Emin's My Bed, Gillian Waring's 60 Minutes of Silence, Mike Wallinger's Sleeper. And then you heard in the voiceover, which was Waldemar Januszczyk, is this really the future of art? Heaven help us, from the Daily Telegraph. I think art should be like when you go to the cinema, a lot of impact. The Turner Prize is all about having an opinion. One of the best and most demanding in the exhibition's history, The Guardian. Artists are clowns in many ways. The Turner Prize is a circus. The Tate is clearly playing up the controversy and enjoying the publicity, and the Turner Prize often gets a lot of press and brings contemporary art to everyone's attention, if only for a short period. Now let's start at the beginning. The Turner Prize is awarded by the Tate each year. So what is the Tate? In 1897, Henry Tate, a wealthy philanthropist, donated his art collection to the nation on condition it was displayed. Now, the National Gallery said it had no space to display the 65 works that he had given to the nation. So he donated £100,000 to build this building. When it opened, it was called the National Gallery of British Art, later renamed Tate, and later still Tate Britain. In many years later, in 1988, Tate Liverpool opened in a converted warehouse on Liverpool's waterfront. In 1993, Tate St Ives opened on the site of a former gasworks overlooking the beach. And then finally, in 2000, Tate Modern opened in London, a few miles downstream from Tate Britain, in a former power station at Bankside. So that's the Tate in terms of the buildings and the collections. What's the prize? Well, in 1984, the Tate announced an annual prize to the British artist who made the greatest contribution to art in Britain in the previous 12 months. Now, it started as a small event at Tate Britain, but it's evolved into a sort of national icon that's provided the tabloid press with the opportunity to stir up instant outrage. And what I'd like to do is to quickly run through a brief history of the awards given, and then to go through it year by year. So, a brief history. The prize is named after the English painter Joseph Mallord William Turner, whose late work was, of course, controversial in his own day. The winner of the prize now receives £25,000, and the runners-up each receive £10,000. Usually the prizes are donated by a sponsor, but not every year. So let me give you some examples. In 1984, the first Turner Prize was awarded to Malcolm Morley, an English artist, but he'd been living in the US for 20 years, which is within the rules. As I said, it can be a British artist working anywhere in the world, but it caused controversy because he hadn't been working in the UK for 20 years. In 1986, the controversial art duo Gilbert and George were awarded the prize after previously being nominated, but not winning the prize in 1984. And that often happens. Artists can be nominated and shortlisted, but not win again and again and again in some cases. In 87, Richard Deacon was awarded the prize for his large, sinuous installation works. In 1988, Tony Cragg won and went on to represent Britain at the 42nd Venice Biennale. In 1989, Richard Long won after 3 previous nominations, and controversially, he won for his lifetime's body of work rather than, as is normal, the work exhibited by the artist over the previous 12 months. In 91, Anish Kapoor received the prize for an untitled piece. In 93, Rachel White-Read was the winner for House, a concrete cast of a house. In 94, Anthony Gormley won for his sculptures of human figures. In 1905, Damien Hirst won for his notorious sculpture Mother and Child Divided, a cow and calf sliced in half. In 97, Gillian Waring won with 60 Minutes of Silence, a group of actors dressed as police officers who had to stand still for an hour. In 1998, Chris Ofili won, the first time, incidentally, in 12 years a painter had won. In 2000, it was won by the photographer Wolfgang Tillmans. In 2001, Martin Creed won for work number 227, The Lights Going On and Off, which is what it was, an empty room with the lights going on and off. In 2003, Grayson Perry won for pots decorated with sexual imagery. In 2007, Mark Wallinger won for his Sleeper, a film of him dressed in a bear costume wandering around an empty museum. And in 2008, Mark Leckey won for his video work that celebrates, in his words, tawdry but somehow romantic elegance of certain aspects of British culture. So that is a sort of an overview of some of the most well-known of the works that have won the Turner Prize. What I'd now like to do is to go through it a bit more carefully, a bit more slowly. This is the way the Turner Prize was exhibited at the first Turner Prize in 1984. It was awarded to Malcolm Morley, and this is what the shortlist looked like. It was in the Devine Gallery at Tate, Britain, and we can see the shortlist. Richard Deacon, the sculpture on the left, for those who have eyes. Behind it, on the left, a Gilbert and George, painting, Drunk with God. Straight ahead is Richard Long and Howard Hodgkin and Malcolm Morley on the right. So this is Morley's painting called Farewell to Crete. And incidentally, I will be, in general, picking out one work by each artist, but the prize is typically won by or for all the works the artist has done in the previous 12 months, usually a major exhibition or exhibitions. So the idea of the prize from day one, from 1984, appealed to the media, and up to 2 million people watched the award ceremony on a BBC programme called Omnibus in 1984. The prize was given by the Arts Minister, Lord Gowrie, and to the outrage of critics and commentators, Morley himself failed to turn up for the event, and so the Arts Minister handed what was then a £10,000 cheque to a stand-in, and the minister stated that his preference was for the land art of Richard Long. Now, the art critic Waldemar Januszczyk, whose voice we heard on the video, said the prize was, or before the prize was awarded, I should say, he said Malcolm Morley is the dark horse of the group, but clearly has no chance, largely because he's been living in America for the past 20 years and hardly qualifies as a British artist. So that's what he wrote shortly before the prize was awarded to Malcolm Morley. And in this painting, we can see there's a statue of a horse trampling across a beach, the one in the middle, with a Cretan war bonnet attached to its back. On the left, there's a group of sunbathers lying under a donkey with blood pouring from its nose. And on the right, there are two sort of statues of women in the form of pillars. They smile and ignore the tourists having fun in the ruins of their ancient civilization. So it's sort of a contemplation of the past and the values of the past in a post-modern world of tourism. Morley himself describes his work as traditional and cites artists like Velázquez, Manet, Cézanne, and Picasso as inspirations. He was, in fact, he took up painting in prison, and he found it difficult to paint until he tried copying a photograph. And although that's not the case in this 1984 work, he became one of the founders of hyperrealism. So I thought I'd show you one of his, what he called superrealism paintings. This is Tackle from 2004, an example of his later work, although it needs to be said that he has always worked in a number of different styles, but I thought I would juxtapose two different versions or two different styles that he's used. In 1986, the prize was won by Gilbert and George for that work, Drunk with God, you saw in 1984. It shows an epic cosmic vision of the world. Artists in the form of Gilbert and George are both observers and creators. There are sort of various motifs that they use in their work. The flower, which for them is a symbol of sex and fecundity. East End youths, icons of ideal manhood. And this is one of their first large works using bright colours and a grid so that it looks like stained glass. The simplified forms remind us of pop art. The flowers look like Andy Warhol lithographs, and the black and white photographs refer to Bacchus, the Greek god of wine. So it's concerned with the social and spiritual condition of man, and is part of a larger series called The Believing World. On the left, you can see the hand of God descending, and it combines the experience of drunkenness with the experience of God. And Gilbert and George said, we don't even know where we stand exactly. We're trying to work it out. Our religious pieces are pro and anti-religion. It's also, of course, like many of their works, about sex. And they, again, to quote them, sex as subject in art is in some ways forbidden. The corner pawn shop has in some ways more freedom because the artist has to justify it morally. We believe that the power of living is sex. There is nothing else. In 1987, the sculpture that we saw before, For Those Who Have Eyes, was one of those works by Richard Deacon that won the prize. And it was a touring exhibition that called Richard Deacon's Sculpture 1980 to 1986. And it included this work, For Those Who Have Eyes, which you saw in the exhibition in the Devine Gallery in 1984. His work always has this suggestion of abstraction. It's an abstract work, but it always suggests something animal-like in a way, but also mathematical or scientific. It's been assembled. He describes himself as creating these works, constructing them from everyday materials, and he uses wood, metal, glass, terracotta, leather, marble, brass, all sorts of materials. He does produce large installation works, and he has produced, like this one, smaller scale works, which he calls art for other people, and it's intended to be for people's homes, although for a work like this you would need a large home. He said, and I'll quote him, "What is the meaning? There isn't a straightforward answer to that question, but it's not meaningless." He added, "There's a huge range of understandings about the way people approach work. There are people who appreciate it on the level of its material qualities, and people who talk about it in relation to other issues. In other words, possible inner meanings of the work." This is another one of his works, Art for Other People, the series I mentioned for the home. This is number 14. In 1988, Tony Cragg was awarded the prize against stiff competition. Richard Hamilton was exhibiting, Richard Long, Lucian Freud. And Tony Cragg made this work during a visit to Britain in 1981. And on that visit, he felt the country was beset by social and economic difficulties, which is what he's illustrating here. There's two elements, of course. There's a map of the British Isles turned on its side, and a standing male figure intended as a self-portrait, placed so that it appears to be looking at the country. Cragg lives in Germany, and Britain is his native country. So it's a view of Britain from a British person now living abroad, and so seeing it partly through the eyes of an outsider. And it was in this year, 1988, that there was a new director of the Tate, Nicholas Sirota, and there were many changes introduced. It was hung in a different way. He gave priority to modern and contemporary art, and the future of the prize was uncertain. The shortlist that had previously been published was no longer published, and so there was just one winner, Tony Cragg. This caused some controversy. There were some complaints that it was just limited to a single person with no runners-up. And in fact, 2 years later, in 1990, that decision was reversed, and the shortlist was again published. But before then, the following year, in 1989, the land artist Richard Long won after 3 previous attempts. And he was controversially awarded the prize for his lifetime body of work rather than a particular exhibition held that previous year. Now, since the 1960s, Long has made works that originated in carefully planned walks that he takes in the countryside. Sometimes his walks themselves create physical or metaphorical marks or maps of the landscape. Other times he transports natural materials into the gallery and places them in simple geometric arrangements, here in a circle with formed of red slate, which he found on the border between Vermont and New York State. It's a mathematical structure which is imposed on natural material, and has sort of created a tension between his concept, this circle of upright stones, and what we'd see in the natural world, which includes these stones. So there's a tension between the two. And Long himself said, a circle outdoors focuses our attention on the environment it is in, while indoors, the circle and materials demand the attention. The following year, there was no prize awarded, as the sponsor, Drexel Burnham Lambert, went bust in a junk bond scandal. And the following year, 91, the television channel, Channel 4, sponsored the event and televised the event, and the rules were changed. So the public could submit nominations, and over 50s were no longer eligible in order to focus on younger artists. And it was then 1991 that Anish Kapoor won for this untitled piece in sandstone and pigment and in blue, a wing at the heart of things, carved stone covered in Prussian blue pigment, which traditionally has a spiritual significance and suggests, Kapoor uses it, I think, to suggest the sky or infinity, or to induce a more spiritual state. Although not, I don't think, a specifically religious symbolism. In 93, the winner was Rachel Whiteread with House. This is Whiteread with the construction in the background, which was created by a group of people wearing protective clothing and masks, who entered the house with like hose pipes and sprayed diluted concrete onto the inner walls of the house. And then the house outer walls, the brick outer walls, were pulled down, leaving the dry concrete inner cast of the house. It was finished on the 25th of October 93 and demolished 11 weeks later on the 11th of January 94 by the council, who were just trying to clear the area to build new houses. Obviously had no concerns about demolishing an artwork. The same year, I should mention, Rachel Whiteread was awarded the anti-Turner Prize for the worst artist in Britain by something called the Kay Foundation. Now, she refused to accept the prize money at first, which was £30,000. But when the Kay Foundation told her that they were going to burn the cash, and incidentally, they probably would have burnt it because the following year, they made a film of themselves burning £1 million of cash of their own money. So because they threatened to burn it, she accepted the money, it was £40,000, I believe, in total, because she gave £30,000 to artists in financial need and £10,000 to a housing charity. So what is she doing here? She's forcing us to examine spaces, voids left by the absence of people. And those voids are made real, made solid, in this case, by the use of concrete. She sometimes uses resin, and that makes us think about the people that lived, in this case, in this house, or who sat on that chair, or who walked on those floorboards that she takes casts of. And that makes us think about the way we and other people interact with objects like the house around us. So by giving material form to what otherwise we don't really see, the space under a table or the inner space of a house, she transforms it into something that is both intimate and private, and turns it into a public display, a public show. One art critic wrote, "I found myself surrounded by the ordinary public and forced to hear their uninformed chatter. They were prepared to stand in front of the exhibits and think for themselves. I was shocked. The public actually enjoy this stuff. Could it be that critics are out of touch?" That was a critic writing in the Sunday Times. And I think it demonstrates the attitude of some critics when he talks about the uninformed chatter of the public, and is surprised when the public actually enjoys modern art. In 1994, Anthony Gormley won, and his piece consists of 5 identical iron figures bent, as you can see, at right angles at the waist. The figures, as typically they are based on a cast made of his body with his wife's help. His wife is also an artist. I won't go through the whole process, but basically he's wrapped in plastic and then covered in plaster, and then the plaster is cut off in sections and then reassembled, and then sometimes, as here, it has metal work. I think in this case, oh no, these are made of cast iron, but often lead beaten around the plaster, and then sometimes, as here, cast in various positions and in various attitudes. In this case, invoking the laws of geometry. He's positioned them in various positions around the room, and he describes these positions as evoking states ranging from, in his words, hysteria, headbanging, catatonia, the awakened dead, and the about to be beheaded. Talking about beheading and death, in 1995, Damien Hirst was awarded the prize for this notorious and controversial at the time sculpture, Mother and Child Divided. A cow and calf were sawn in half, and each half placed in a glass-walled tank containing preservative, formaldehyde, and each half was placed sufficiently far apart so that a visitor could walk between the two halves, and then the two tanks are themselves separated. It was originally created for the 93 Venice Biennale, and it became the focal point of the prize. It caused controversy, divided opinion, although it was how many years? I think it was 4 years after he had produced the original and famous shark in formaldehyde called The Physical Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living. And both works, of course, confront us with death, although in this case there's also love, isolation, separation, and containment. Incidentally, in case you're wondering about the soaring up of the cow, the cows are, of course, and calves are killed all the time in abattoirs. And I think what he did is he selected a cow and a calf from an abattoir, and his assistants cut them in half. I think I've seen it done with a chainsaw, but I'm not sure about that. And Hirst himself doesn't actually make his works. He employs teams of assistants who produce them under his direction. In 97, the winner was Gillian Wearing, and this is 60 minutes of silence, and a group of actors dressed as police officers and were told to stand still without moving for an hour, although in the video, this is just a still, but in the video there's an occasional surreptitious scratching. What's it about? Well, her work has always been about identity. Let me show you another work. In the early 1990s, shortly after she'd graduated from Goldsmiths College, she made a short video, and this is a still from the video. She purchased T-shirts and invited a transvestite, a prostitute, and an escort to choose a T-shirt. And in the video, all four, the Gillian Wearing herself is the second from the left. You can see them all drinking wine and messing around in the garden that you see they're in. They each chose a T-shirt from a collection that she'd purchased, and so the T-shirts declare and hide their character, their identity. Incidentally, if you can't read it, the one she's wearing, second from the left, features a cartoon character called Garfield saying, "Am I cool or what?" Now, shortly after that, she produced Signs That Say What You Want Them to Say and Not Signs That Say What Someone Else Wants You to Say. And what she did is she approached people on London streets and asked them to write on a card what they were thinking, and she then photographed them and displayed it in an exhibition. One of the photographs is an elderly couple holding a sign saying, "I like to be in the country." Another is a homeless man with a sign. He wrote, "I signed on and they wouldn't give me nothing." And amongst the group, one of her best known is this one, which I've selected, a smartly dressed young man with a mild, even complacent expression, holding a sign simply saying, "I'm desperate." And she said, and I quote, "People are still surprised that someone in a suit could actually admit to anything, especially in the early 1990s, just after the crash. I think he was actually shocked by what he'd written, which suggests to me it must have been true. Then he got a bit angry, handed back the piece of paper, and stormed off. "1998. It's the piece that I started with, Chris Ofili, No Woman, No Cry. It was controversial at the time, not because of the subject matter, which I'll describe in a moment, but because of the material used. Believe it or not, the pendant of the necklace and the two brown balls on the floor are elephant dung, sealed, well sealed in resin, and glued to the canvas. And this caused so much controversy that an artist appeared on the steps of the Tate in protest and deposited dung on the steps of the Tate. It's the first time, by the way, in 12 years that a painter had won the prize. And when he accepted the prize, he started by saying, "Oh man, thank God, where's my check?" But getting serious, the controversy should have been about what the subject matter is. No Woman, No Cry is based on the murder of a young lad, Stephen Lawrence, killed in a racially motivated attack, and a public inquiry into the murder concluded that the Metropolitan Police Force was institutionally racist. In each of you can't see it in this reproduction, but in each of the tears being shed by the woman who, it's his mother, is a collaged image of Stephen Lawrence's face with the words R.I.P. Stephen Lawrence written across it. And in fact, it's written in an ink that shows up more strongly in ultraviolet light. And he intended this to be read both as a statement about the murder itself and also a universal portrayal of melancholy and grief. In 2000, the prize was won by Wolfgang Tillmans for a series here of photographs of Concorde from ground level under the flight path, and some of them are taken just outside the airport perimeter fence. In his words, the photographs are a representation of an unprivileged gaze or view. I like to assume exactly the position that everybody can take. End quote. And this approach of taking the sorts of photographs that anybody could take, in a way, if you like, snapshots, is an approach that was first taken by an American photographer called Stephen Shaw, who produced a pioneering series of colour photographs on his road trip across America called Uncommon Places. That was published in 1982. So what Tillmans is doing here is, rather than thinking of this machine, this aeroplane, the Concorde, as luxurious and inaccessible, he's celebrating it as our desire for a utopian future where previously unimaginable technology could become part of everyday life. And incidentally, he took this 3 years before Concorde was retired, following the crash in which all passengers and crew were killed, and knowing that, as we do now, it changes the way we perceive these photographs. Incidentally, another work by Tillmans is this photograph, crab legs with a fly sitting on them, that was used to advertise an exhibition of his work more recently. outside the Tate, a group called the Stuckist Art Group staged their first demonstration against not specifically the winner, but against the prize as a whole, dressed as clowns and describing the prize itself as an ongoing national joke. What they wanted to do, the Stuckists, was to promote figurative art, and they opposed any form of conceptual art. The name Stuckism arose when Tracy Emin told one of the founders that his art, poetry, and music were stuck, and the name stuck.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Martin Creed, and I make The Lights Going On and Off. It's work number 227. I see art galleries or museums as being theatres for art, and I see the experience of viewing as a live theatrical experience, and that goes for looking at a painting as much as, experiencing like a room installation. The piece The Lights Going On and Off is a real attempt to try to engage with the theatrical situation which is all around you. I mean, it's almost exactly like a piece of music. It exists as a score or an instruction, and the piece, like a piece of music, the piece needs to be played or made in order to be experienced.
So that was Martin Creed speaking, the prize winner in 2001 for The Lights Going On and Off, work number 227. The artist Jacqueline Crofton threw eggs at the wall in protest. So it was a controversial work. I remember the press making fun of the work. One of his explanations, you just heard some of what he said. Another one was, I wanted to do something in a room, but I didn't know if I wanted the lights on or off. And a similar thing has happened with other of his works. He wasn't sure whether to make the work positive or negative, and so he's included both, which in his view adds up to nothing, but at the same time is something. In 2003, Grayson Perry won the prize for pots, decorated in forms of what you might call sexual imagery. When he won the prize, he appeared, as he often does, wearing a flouncy skirt to collect the prize, and he said, I'm quite surprised to be here tonight because 2 days ago I had a phone call asking if I would be judge for not the Turner Prize. And 2 years ago I was asked by the Stuckists to dress as a clown and come and be on the steps outside. So I'm thrilled and slightly surprised to be here. Grayson Perry is one of our most original artists in the UK. He's disliked in fact, he was disliked at the time by certain critics who felt that pots can't aspire to great art. Of course, since then, Grayson Perry has worked in a wide variety of media. Also, at the time, these pots probably weren't the most controversial entry. I think that was probably the entry that got the press most worked up was Jake and Dinos Chapman with a work called Death, which was what appeared to be 2 cheap plastic blow-up sex dolls. It was, in fact, made of bronze and painted to look like plastic. If you look at the pot, you can see that there's a person wearing a dress that is a sort of self-portrait and gives rise to the title Golden Ghosts. There are idyllic country cottages in the background. his aim is to create a mood or tension, and the sad, if you can see it, the sad seated girl is a child that was affected by the Chernobyl nuclear power station disaster. It was produced at a time when Perry himself was coming to terms with his own unhappy past. In his acceptance speech, let me finish with a quote that he gave from Perry in his acceptance speech. "I think the art world had more trouble coming to terms with me being a potter than my choice of frocks. I'm not a standard bearer for ceramics. I'm a standard bearer for Grace and Perry. There wasn't a rush of taxidermists after Damien Hirst won." In 2007, the winner of the then £25,000 prize was Mark Wallinger.
I'm showing Sleeper, which was something that I made in Berlin. Sleeper is a term to do with espionage and double agents, and I think it is in a sense about how far we can get within the consciousness of someone or something other, and how the symbols of certain culture impinge upon the consciousness of a people. The bear is a sort of inescapable symbol of Berlin. I mean, the word itself derives from that.
A film of him dressed in a bear costume wandering around an empty museum, but the prize was officially given for a different work of art. It included this work, but it was officially given for a work called State Britain, which recreated all the objects, and there's more you can see here, all the objects in Brian Hoare's anti-war display in Parliament Square in London. And the judges commended Wallinger's work for its immediacy, visceral intensity, and historic importance, and called it a bold political statement with art's ability to articulate fundamental human truths. Regarding this work, State Britain, Mark Wallinger said to the BBC, "I'm indebted to all those people who contributed to the making of State Britain. Brian Hoare is a remarkable man who has waged a tireless campaign against the folly and hubris of our government's foreign policy. For 6.5 years, he has remained steadfast in Parliament Square, the last dissenting voice in Britain. Bring home the troops, give us back our rights, trust the people." Incidentally, this is State Britain is shown here in Tate, Britain, but the Turner Prize was held outside London for the first time. It was held in Tate, Liverpool in 2007. And the Stuckists announced they weren't demonstrating for the first time since 2000 because of the lameness of the year's show, to use their words. It doesn't merit, they said, the accolade of the traditional demo. Maybe they found it hard to demonstrate against a demonstration. This is Mark Leckey, Made in Heaven, a work that's concerned with desire and transformation based on his life as an artist who grew up in North London. What it is, as you can probably see, it's a video of a reconstruction of Jeff Koons' sculpture called Bunny, and it's actually in his flat, in the studio part of his flat. And as you can see, you can't ever see a reflection of the camera, so it's clear that Leckey has digitally constructed this image. A critic in The Guardian wrote The most that could be mustered was half-hearted tut-tutting over an exhibit featuring a naked mannequin on the toilet. Many critics complained the exhibition was too dry, too academic, and worst of all, too dull. One of Lecky's works in the exhibition Made in Heaven, in which he appears to have recreated Jeff Koons' work Rabbit, also appears to be in Lecky's flat. And so the critic himself is not really commenting on the work, but is simply describing the works, two of the works that he saw at the exhibition. And what I thought I'd do is I finished in 2008, and I've jumped up to this year, 2024. No prize winner has yet been announced, but a shortlist of 4 has been announced. So I thought I would bring you right up to date and just talk through the shortlist. Claudette Johnson was born in Manchester, nominated for an exhibition of her work called Presence, which was at the Courtauld Gallery, and another exhibition of her work called Drawn Out in New York. Pio Abad, born in Manila and works in London, had an exhibition called To Those Sitting in Darkness at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, drawings, etchings and sculptures of works in museums, which he has combined in order to ask questions of museums. And it also references the museum's collection. Worthing-born Delane Lebas. This is one of the works in her that was nominated. Incipit Vita Nova. Here begins the new life. A new life is beginning, is the name of the exhibition held in Vienna. Targets colonialism in museums, focuses on portraits of Black women and men, explores the history of the Roma people and the death of her grandmother. And then finally, Jasleen Kaur lives in London, and her exhibition uses family photographs, an Axminster carpet, a vintage Ford Escort, iron brew, kinetic handbells, and she's been nominated for her altar sculpture, which was showcasing her growing up in Glasgow's Sikh community. And it features, as you can see here, a red sports car covered in an ornamental doily, and in her words is a representation of her dad's first car and his migrant desires. Blasted snippets of uplifting pop songs referencing freedom and liberation throughout the space are also part of the work. I don't know who's going to win, but my vote goes to Claudette Johnson, who's been painting Black men and women for the last 40 years. This is another one of her works, blues, dance. Perhaps I'm biased as I love painting. I like this particular picture because of its energy. She seems to be dancing out of the frame. So I'll end, I think, with a quote that I'll read from the artist Helen Chadwick. I don't think a prize is the right way to reward the arts. It makes sense in something like competitive sports, but art is the antithesis of competition. It pits you against colleagues rather than viewing you all together. Thank you for your time and attention. Look forward to giving another talk to you soon. Goodbye for now.